Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you again for joining us today on the Healing and Dealing podcast. Today, I have something a little different story that I'm so excited to share with all of you. I have Aspen here. She grew up in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, mostly by herself, the trees, the fairies. Am I saying that word right?
Mhm.
Fairies and her yellow Labrador Retriever Snowshoe. In her sacred forest, she was deeply connected to nature, its magic, and to spirit. She joined the Navy when she was 17 and enlisted as an enlisted sailor, commissioned from the United States Naval Academy in 2019 as a naval aviator with a BS in operations research, which she describes as applied math for humans. Love it. In 2022, she was medically evacuated from the Middle East to San Diego, where she began her radical healing journey. The spiritual wellness community welcomed her with open arms as she reawakened her spirituality and Celtic Druid roots. Having her mala always with her allowed her to move through the pain and the darkness by keeping her grounded with a physical tool, knowing the essence of the anatomy of the mala and the healing powers of the crystals. As she regained her strength, she was inspired to share her tools and magic with the world, leading her to create Aspen Aurora, manifest your aura, merging her math and her mystic passions together. As an academic, a warrior, a world traveler, an intuitive, Aspen can help you choose the light by helping you see your own. How beautiful.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Such a story, so much that you have such a different perspective that you're going to bring to myself and my audience today. First, I mean, just your background alone is is so different, being in the Navy and all that you endured with that. I can't wait for you to dive into that story. But I just want the listeners to get to know you a little better without, me reading your bio. So let's get to know Aspen and like what were some major things that you went through that brought you to where you're at today?
Yeah, that's a loaded question for
It is.
sure.
I know.
Um,
Wherever you want to start.
yeah, I mean, in an interview, typically I answer that question with a brief kind of life story, and that life
Yeah.
story in a lot of ways starts when I enlisted at 17, and I was a Navy cryptologist. My first job was at the NSA, and I loved it and I was
Mhm.
good at it, and that's what got me to the Naval Academy. And the Naval Academy was very hard and very gritty, but I would not have traded that experience for the world. And then after I commissioned, I experienced two capital T trauma events, and one of them was a mass shooting and international terrorist attack in
Oh,
Pensacola, Florida, where my soul brother was murdered.
oh,
And every 4 months after that, somebody I loved died, and it just didn't really end. And I I was a uniform victim advocate in the service, so I'm well aware of what trauma brain is and
mhm.
what it does on a physiological level. And so I got, help early and often, or at least attempted to, and I I was still performing well. And
Mhm.
so I clearly wasn't that sick,
Yeah.
at least from their perspective. And so I got selected to be a department head for a task force out in the Middle East. And I was like, you want me to what? You're nuts. Um,
Yeah.
but off I go. And if I think a few months, a year, not long into that experience, my body just started shutting down, and my symptoms got very severe. And then I was medically evacuated, which sounds like,
What
you
does that
know,
mean?
I yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people at least I thought that it was going to be like a quick way to get to where you need to be. That's like
Mhm.
what the word evacuation leads me to believe. And that was not what happened. It was atrocious conditions in so many countries and multiple C-17s, and I was in that process for well over 2 weeks, and it was just a total nightmare, and I finally get down to San Diego, wheels down in San Diego, like, literally kissing the ground because it was just such a nightmare, and my husband's not allowed in the room with me, and they tell me it's gonna be 6 to 8 weeks for an intake appointment, and I was like, "What?"
Wait, where did they have you at?
I mean, I wasn't inpatient,
Oh,
so
gotcha.
they sent me home, and I was so defeated at that point and so just thankful that part of that experience was over, like, now like, I had some sense of, like, relief even though I had the nightmare was only gonna continue, but in that moment, I had some level of relief, and so I didn't even challenge it. I just Eeyored, like, "Okay," and just,
Mhm.
like, proceeded through, which as I mean, I know you don't know me well, but that's very unlike me. I'm not an Eeyore character for sure, and so that started uh, the medical fight in the Navy and with Western medicine, and, um that's its own beast, but the highlight of the story is that I had the time and the resources to really pour into myself from a spiritual wellness, energetic healing perspective, and I found a lot of light, community, and was able to transmute some of this density,
Right.
and I'm really grateful for that, and that's what led me to start Aspen Aurora to give back some of my own tools, and it allowed me space to think about what this means not just for myself, but for my soul family, which is continuing to die, and
Mhm.
that's not a thing that has ended. And now I'm getting out of the Navy. I signed my findings yesterday, actually.
Really?
Um, yep. So it's
Wow.
happening. So that's a
Okay.
lot of bit about me.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack. I'd like to go back to like your first big trauma that you had while you were in the Navy. I mean, you went through something extremely traumatizing, and then they eventually had you, they kind of like looked over it, would you say? Or do you want to dive into that story a little bit more?
The first capital T trauma that I experienced right after the Navy was, um, I was held at gunpoint in my own house, with somebody that I knew, and at that time, I was 25, but I was also an academy grad, and I was also a naval aviator, and so I I think back at this time, and I'm still very much unpacking this. I'm trying to, like, distinguish between what was my responsibility to know better versus I was a 25-year-old kid, God,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and when you're in a high level, high performance environment, the expectations are higher, and so I constantly dance with, like, how to think about that time, and from a Navy perspective, I use Military One Source, which is like a way to, like, get help pretty fast without it going on your record, and so the Military One Source program writ large is a great program.
Mhm.
However, when I saw what I thought was gonna be a trauma counselor, they victim blamed, and they said that I should have known better and I should have seen it coming and
Give
these
me some more
things, and
context, like what, like even in your own thoughts when you've said, "Should I have known better?" And now this person's telling you that, like, what's the context like of the event? So we can just get a better idea.
sure. So, um, this person, well, the specifics are a little gritty, and I'm not sure if unpacking it would be the best use, but
Sure.
um, the the context is this person was an addict
Okay.
and he was an alcoholic. Um, And so that leads you to expect a certain behavior out of people. It's
Gotcha.
important to understand that I did not choose to live with this person. It was um, how the cards fell after I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot more to that story that involves
Yeah, I was just
a lot
curious,
of
like,
betrayal and
why you would even think that you could have handled it differently or should have known better, like, I just wanted to know where
well,
that was
because
coming
I have a lot of trauma in my life and because I'm an intelligence professional generally. So,
from. Right.
I was able to talk that person down and to like not kill me using my quality hostage negotiation
Wow.
skills. And where did I learn that? I learned that at a pretty young age. And then I further learned that through my career as an intelligence professional.
Yeah.
And and that was like a resounding feedback, like to think that I could have handled a situation
Yeah.
like that in the circumstances and so forth is like so beyond the pale and like very problematic. Like that is
Right.
problematic in itself.
Yes.
And I think in the Navy we always say like you revert back to your training, but you also revert back to your life training. That it's not
Right.
all in a simulated,
Yeah.
training environment. Like you have life training too. And my life training led me to believe that I can get
Mm.
myself not out of, but like I can save myself regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah.
And um, that experience just taught me that, I mean, I can, but at what cost?
Mhm.
And, um, just because I did have a traumatic upbringing does not mean I have to invite that in. And it, of course, like, wasn't my fault. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, I'm in CPT, PTSD, trauma therapy as we speak. So I'm unpacking that as we
Mhm.
speak. Um,
What types of things are you
but
learning through that?
through CPT,
Yeah, or even just the therapy you're in right now, like, has there been any big moments or realizations you've had?
yeah, I mean, we're relatively new in the process because getting help through Western medicine is a nightmare and it takes forever. So
Yeah.
a lot of people who pronounce to be trauma therapists are not trained in the classic modalities to treat trauma, and that's one of my biggest pet peeves. Um, and it's unsafe. It's not just like a pet. I say pet peeve because it frustrates me greatly, but it's so much more than that. It's a safety thing, and I
I
can't tell you how many
totally agree.
hours I spent on the phone asking people, okay, but what do you use to treat trauma? And the common response is, well, it depends on the trauma. That's not what I asked. What modalities do you use to treat trauma? And I'm expecting like a list of a few things: prolonged exposure therapy, EMDR, CPT. Those are the main three, but there are others. And if you can name one of them, I'm
Yeah.
satisfied. It's not like
Right.
I'm trying to like test you or like
Yeah, but if
challenge
you're
you. I just need to know that you know the modalities to treat trauma. And
totally.
if you don't, then we're not a good fit. And people got very angry with me. Providers got very angry with me,
Wow.
and it was like, I'm living in the twilight zone. This is crazy.
That's so good that
So
you made those calls first, though. Like, I just went through a similar situation where I was looking just online and I was specifically looking for those modalities that you're talking about to deal with the trauma from my childhood. And I found one, they were all listed, but then when, 4 or 5 sessions in, I'm like, when are we going to start the trauma work? When are we going to start the healing work? And instead, it was more just, what are you dealing with this
talk
week?
therapy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I got nothing from, 5 sessions with her. So I totally agree. And I love the idea that you took the time to call and advocate for yourself and not waste 5 sessions with someone that wasn't going to work out. So,
Well, and when you're dealing with PTSD, it is unsafe to do that. It
yeah,
is not
totally.
just a waste of time, energy, money, all the things. It is unsafe.
Right.
And when so one of the main themes that you not realize, it's in the textbook, there are five main themes to trauma work: safety, power control,
Hmm.
intimacy, um, esteem, and then there's a fifth one. And um, it'll come, it'll come to me.
Okay.
But um, in those themes, one of the main pieces is trust. That's the fifth one. And when those things have been violated by a trauma, especially a capital T trauma, when you enter into a new relationship, a new agreement with that on the table, and then you're met with anything but healing,
Mm-hmm.
you're effectively re-traumatizing somebody and
Yeah,
baking in and reinforcing already believed
right.
thoughts, feelings, behaviors because it
Mm-hmm.
keeps being repeated to you. So again, this is not about wasting time. This is very
Mm-hmm.
much like it is unsafe.
Right.
And it's something I'm very, very passionate about. Um,
Yeah,
because it's also
especially.
go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. You can finish.
Yeah, just that it's also like when you're talking about somebody who has PTSD and they are trying to get help and they know all of these things, they are oftentimes still in that trauma state. So you're
Yeah.
requiring them to do all of this vetting and to engage in hard conversations when they themselves are unwell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
Yeah.
blasphemy to my mind. So at providers, please stop saying that you treat trauma when you don't.
Right. It's like that word that people just throw around so easily, especially as providers, and they think that they, can, but even as a coach myself, in the practice sessions, I would know when I was getting to that point that I couldn't go any further because it was unsafe. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like I didn't have the tools yet to it was just practice sessions in the coaching program. And so
mhm,
that made me really realize like I'm not going to uh, assist anyone in healing their trauma unless I actually know what I'm doing because it is very unsafe. And there should be like that level you get to with your provider and they will know what to do. But if they don't, then you're just stuck in that PTSD mode or, that fight or flight mode, your body, everything gets involved. So, yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. And I know we touched on this when we met last time, but the 5 sessions I had with the provider through my insurance, and now I'm like 4 or 5 sessions in with a life spiritual coach, and it's like night and day. Like I've had breakthrough after breakthrough and just deep connection, and there's so much trust like you said. I mean, it's insane, and it's not that expensive. Like I can manage it, but I know not everyone can manage it, which is another thing we're going to talk about is like accessibility and like who can have these services that's outside of Western medicine, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, and as far as like the breakthrough after breakthrough, I've thought a lot about this, and I think that the fundamental difference between taking the spiritual route, and there's a lot of overlap here, so I want to be
Yeah.
very clear that we're not talking about isolated paths that
Yeah.
don't have overlap. They very much do. But if
100%.
you're comparing like Western medicine, traditional therapy to the spiritual route, again, definitions matter here. There's a lot of overlap. But when you're comparing those two, Western medicine and psychology
Mhm.
generally has one goal, and that is to fix you.
Yes.
And spirituality wants you to be your highest self, knowing that being a human effing sucks sometimes. And there's a lot of pain and trauma
Mhm.
and grief involved. And there's oftentimes nothing to fix. You just have to deal and heal, which is exactly what you're doing
Yes.
with your work, which is why it's so important. I mean, we met the first time some months ago, but it feels like forever ago.
It
Gosh.
does. I know.
And you told me about like healing and dealing podcast. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. I was so excited
That's so
because
cool.
that's ultimately what it's about. It's about healing and dealing.
Right.
It's not always about fixing. In fact, in my experience, it almost always is not
I
about
agree.
fixing it.
I totally agree. And especially when you go the spiritual route, yes, there are a lot of overlaps, like you said, but I feel like with that type of coach, you get there on your own with their guidance. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you find your way back to yourself by just them like in evoking things from you or like asking the right questions, powerful questions where you're just like reflecting and you're like, oh, and you like start to realize things on your own besides someone telling you like this is what you should do, this is how you fix it. Like there's just to me, I've seen it, I've felt it myself. There is a big difference, and coming back to like yourself and your wholeness and your highest self, like you said, is always the priority in my opinion, you know, whatever that looks like is going to look
Definitely.
so different for everybody. So kind of switching gears back to your story, I want the listeners to know like what that 2 weeks was like for you and what you went through if you want to talk about that a little bit. And you know, I was like my jaw was dropped when we were talking about it last time, so I feel like it would, you know, there's people out there that have probably gone through a lot of similar things and you are their voice. So if you want to dive into any pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 weeks medical evacuation was a nightmare. I mean, that's the cliff notes of it. Um, I'm still active duty, so I'm going to be a little bit mindful with how I speak about that experience publicly in this moment.
Okay.
Um, but I will be very loud about it soon. And by loud, I mean like writing to Congress, by, having this conversation in a little bit less loose-lipped. But the premise is it is not about getting you home. It is not about getting you to doctor's hands. It is purely to continue to take your vital signs and make sure you have a pulse and to get you home in a way I want to say like the cheapest way possible, but I'm a math person and the numbers don't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if the way it's done is to ensure that the mechanism exists, like should there be a war, or if it's just to pad, Air Force Reserve flight hours. I cannot
Yeah.
wrap my head around the why, and I have spent a lot of time trying because it's so horrendous. The whole
Yeah.
experience was so horrendous, and these people are very sick,
That's what I was just going to
tra-
ask. What type of people?
traumatized, like loss of limb, like
Wow.
all of the things that you can imagine. And we were treated a lot more like criminals than we were like patients. And at
Wow.
least those criminals had a pulse. That's the only thing that it came down to. I never once talked to a doctor, never once had anybody like check in on me. None of those things happened. It was literally like, are you alive? And mine was mental health, but like mine was mental health that was prompted because I spent 5 days in the hospital in Bahrain with physical symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So I was evacuated under the PTSD umbrella, but I like my internal organs were failing. I was extraordinarily sick. And the only questions were, are you going to kill yourself? And and then taking my vitals. Like it wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
question, like you're literally strapped to like other things to check your vitals. But there's
Mm-hmm.
no like conversation there.
Wow.
And it was just a complete nightmare. And it just like, and like no one would tell me like when the next flight was, and
How
they
scary.
wouldn't
God.
estimate like when we would get to San Diego, and they're like, yeah, you may or may not like get on the flight in, and by flight we mean like a C-17. Like you're literally strapped in like cargo. You are not, this is not like a United flight with like service. Like that's
Yeah.
not how that works. Like you are strapped in like
I've seen it, I think, in
literally.
movies.
Yeah, exactly. Um and so, and I don't know, like 4 or 5 C-17s, and again, multiple countries and multiple states. I've kind of like blurred a little bit of it out
Yeah.
just because like I had a lot to unpack when I got here, and that was um it's a part of my story, but it's still like it
Yeah.
happened relatively recently comparative to everything else, so I haven't
Right.
had the bandwidth to like unpack that and chop it away. But the moral of the story is that it was an effing nightmare and it's criminal, and it just cannot be the right answer. And it, again, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm a math person and I want it to make sense, and it does not make sense to me.
So after
And
you got home, that was another nightmare, right? Like dealing with
oh yeah,
trying to get
it
the
was
help that you
crazy.
needed. So what did
It
that
was
look like?
crazy.
Because I remember you told me like there was a time you were at like a facility or something, right?
Yeah. So bear with me. I've everything I've told you thus far, I've not really told anyone publicly. So bear with me. But yeah, I mean, I lasted, 5, 6 days, I don't know, like sometime less than a week before I was like in just a super, super dark place, like completely defeated, like I said. And I had like passive suicidal ideations, which means that like you don't want to be alive anymore, but you don't have a plan. Like
Right.
that's the difference between passive and active.
Yeah.
And so my husband takes me to the ER, and at the ER, the social worker says, the only way you're going to get into this IOP, intensive outpatient program, which is what I was promised in the Middle East, the only way you're going to get into that is if you say you're suicidal. And I said, okay. So I was like, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
how long am I going to be here? Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And all of that was nonsense, of course. And so they don't have enough beds at the military hospital here in Balboa. So they send me to API, and the API is not veterans with PTSD. It is people who have um, more active mental health issues and more active symptoms and a
Yeah.
lot of addiction and uh, people that I have never really been around in my adult life because I've had the luxury of being of being in the Navy. And so I get there and that's a nightmare. They,
Mm.
take your phone, they take all of your stuff. Like you can't, I mean, it's tragic. So total loss of agency there. And of course, I'm not allowed to see my husband again. And he is asking questions like, what are you doing there? Like, why
Right.
can't I
What's
see
going
her? That
on?
doesn't make any sense. They're like, oh, COVID, da da da. He was like, okay, well, it's 2022. Like, what do you mean COVID? Like, why can't I
Right.
see her? And
This was so recent.
yeah, and
Oh my
and
gosh, I
it's
didn't know that.
yeah, this is like less than a year ago. And or I guess a little bit more than a year ago now because it's October. And it's important to say, actually, I'm going to pause here because I want to really hype my husband. So before we went to the ER, my husband's on the phone like with the Navy. To this day, I don't really know who he was talking to. And he was like, this is an emergency. You told her it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks for an appointment. Like, what are you doing? And then they were like, well, sorry, sir, we just don't have enough providers. And my husband's like, not enough providers? I thought I was on the phone with the US Navy. Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
and he's like, so what? You just let people die out here? And then the person, again, I don't know who he was talking to, was like, yeah, we're sorry, sir.
Oh my gosh, I have the chills right.
Yeah. So then I go to the ER. Then
Oh,
I go to API and get trapped in the loony bin. Like, let's just call it what it is.
I was gonna say
And
that.
yeah, and once again, that was a nightmare. My roommate was a active woman who was dealing with, violent schizophrenia, and
Gosh.
it, again, treated like criminals, not like patients. You're allowed to be outside for 10 minutes a day,
Oh my
and you don't have
god.
access to your phone. And
Did they tell you
it
it was
was
gonna be that
terrible.
bad when like when
Of
you
course
first went
not.
in? Oh
No, and I
my
asked them multiple times. I asked them multiple times, and I was like, I even said, I was like, yes, like this is a passive suicidal ideation, but I'm here to get into a program. Like I'm safe.
you need
Like
help,
this
yeah.
is nonsense, and I just want to see a doctor. And um,
But
so I continue that, and I go in on a Thursday, Wednesday. I don't remember what day, but like up, like my 3 days were up on that
mm,
Thursday, Friday. And it's supposed to be like a 72-hour hold if you're
Mm-hmm.
not there voluntarily, but I was there voluntarily, so that also didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So then the social worker tells me that she can't get a hold of my command. Direct quote, I'm air quoting for those who are listening, that she can't get a hold of my command because it's Juneteenth. And I said, no, it's not. Juneteenth is June 19th. It's June 6th or something, like sometime before, like
Yeah.
well before June 19th. And then we go back and forth, and then she just skips for the weekend. And so I tell the staff multiple times, I was like, no, you are holding me here in a nightmare scenario because your social worker is outright lying, and she's saying that I'm the problem because I'm the one trapped in the psych ward. But look at the dates, it's black and white on the calendar. Juneteenth is June 19th. My husband is my non-medical attendant. He is allowed to get me. This is nonsense. And again, bus up to my husband, who was like, why are you holding her? Why can't I see her? She was supposed to be here for 2 days. It's been 5. What are you doing? Fix yourself. And so he like very relentlessly like
Mm-hmm.
kept trying to pull me out, because when we agreed
God.
to do this, we thought it was going to be like, beautiful rehab,
Oh
like,
my God.
like something nice and pretty, and
Oh
like
Lord.
play games or something, and that was not what happened at all. So I finally get out like 5 or 6 days later, and I was just again traumatized. And
You're
so
re-traumatized. Oh my
in
gosh.
a huge way, and like that happened multiple times. It happened with the medical evacuation, it happened being trapped in the loony bin, it happened when the Navy was just like, you're probably gonna med board, and I was like, med board? I haven't even started treatment yet. What are you talking about? And it was just one thing after another, and I did eventually get into the IOP. I did eventually put one foot in front of the other, and I spent a lot of time at Levant. I spent a lot of time in the
A what?
spiritual wellness space,
Oh, okay.
Levant, where we met.
Oh, gotcha.
Um, it's a spiritual wellness boutique here in La Jolla. If anyone is interested, you should definitely come through.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful, beautiful space, and it's run by beautiful, beautiful women. And they just gave me access, or re-access, to a world that had been lost to me for a long time in the military. And I leaned all the way in, because I mean, when you're in that state, it's literally binary. It's like, is this going to help or not help? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very like your worldview is so inward, and like you can't look out really. Like that's not how it works. Like you very much have blinders on. It's like moving is difficult, so like you have to be very mindful about like what steps you put in front of the other, because the boy, you believe they are baby steps, so you hope they're in the right
Yeah.
direction. And so when you're in that state, I mean, for me, I totally threw spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck, and I'm grateful I did that, because I learned a lot about healing modalities writ large. And it also allowed me to trust myself for what felt good and what didn't feel good, because
Mm-hmm.
I, the story that we tell ourselves, for me,
Mm-hmm.
had been stripped multiple times, like
Yeah.
shredded over and over and over again. I was like, okay, so I clearly cannot trust that narrative, because
Mm-hmm.
that just doesn't apply to me for whatever reason. I'm supposed to be learning a different lesson here. And so I tried different solutions, and it allowed for a quantum leap that for sure would not have been possible otherwise. I don't see how it would have been, at least.
Yeah, that's your journey is just it's in such a it was so recent, first of all, and the fact that you're still unpacking everything and you're sharing it with us, I just really want to honor you and thank you for doing that because I know it's not easy, especially when
Yeah, sorry if it was disjointed.
no, it was beautiful. Like I'm sure that there's other people that have gone through something similar, and if they haven't, this opens their eyes to something that they might not have understood. And you lived it. And I'm so curious, like, I know right now you've started your nonprofit, which I want you to talk about, but I can't wait to see where this takes you in 5, 10 years because
Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask you is why do you think you've gone through all this?
I've spent a lot of time with that question, and I don't have a good answer, but
I think you do.
I
No.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give it the good old college try. I think that I have the unique life experience to have seen so much with my two eyes.
Mhm.
It's not a story I read in a book. It is not a story somebody else told me. I lived it. I experienced it. It happened through my own two eyes.
Mhm.
And as a mathematician and as a statistics person, there's a fundamental problem with anecdotal evidence. And so that's an internal conflict for me. But the reality is, I do have a lot of anecdotal evidence. And so that anecdotal evidence allows me to ask the right questions from data, and it allows me access to to a lot of different types of spaces. And I very much intend to use that to further a mission, and that mission is to ensure that people have access to healing services. That mission is to change the narrative about pain
Hmm.
and help people understand that pain is a part of the human condition and that it is not, no one should be here to fix it.
Mhm.
We should be here to hold and bear witness and to reestablish community in a way that's completely devoid in our culture.
Yes.
And it's to help other people understand that these things don't happen in faraway places all the time. They happen right here at home. And
Mhm.
we can't put our head in the sand and bulldoze through. We also can't put violent stories on Instagram and act like that is activism.
True.
So I I'm dealing with it in real time, and
Mhm.
I all I can say in this moment is one, I think it's in my stars, and two, I am going to use this lived life experience to shine light on some shadows and to bring it out, call it to the table so that we can do better together.
Beautiful answer. I love it. I love it. I think the work that you're doing is so needed. And I've already learned so much, for people who don't know anything about, the Navy or any type of, what's it called? See, this is how bad I am. I can't even think of the word. Any type of service. What do you call it? Like all of them together, Navy, Marines, Army.
Oh, like the military?
Yeah, military. Thank you. I'm like, what is the word? Like, I don't know.
Armed services, military.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who just aren't like familiar with it. So, um, I can't wait to be a part of the movement that you're creating and to help you in any way that I can. Let's talk about it. What is the nonprofit that you made and what I know you just kind of talked about like your mission and what drove you to this, but what's your plan like here in the future?
Yeah, so it's important to highlight a couple of things. The second capital T traumatic incidents was that international terrorist attack and the mass shooting that I talked about.
Yeah.
And when we hear mass shooting, um, the response is which one?
Yeah,
And
so true.
I want to kind of sit with that. Like when that's the response is like which one, then it's not just an isolated thing that happens. This is a lot of people who are affected by
Absolutely.
this type of criminality and terrorism.
Mhm.
This one was an international terrorist attack, but the most of them in the US are of course domestic.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Josh was murdered, my soul brother in that shooting, he was the first one in 2019, but every 4 months somebody after that died. And I found out, as you ask the questions like how, like what happened
Mm-hmm.
to your classmates and to your soul family, what happened often, more than 80%, is at least in some part due to a failed healthcare system.
Wow.
And after 10, I just stopped counting because my heart literally couldn't take it anymore. And so when I was
So
really sitting with myself, go ahead.
were they killed in like active duty, or it was actually like failed healthcare system?
No, yeah, it was actual failed healthcare
Oh my
system, like
God.
misdiagnoses, um,
Wow.
bad MRIs, lots of suicide. But the suicide is not, there's two separate questions here. It's suicide because they were depressed. Like, why were they depressed? That's one question.
Right.
But the bigger question is if they were in active treatment, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And if they weren't in active treatment and they tried to get that active treatment and they were denied, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And so, and again, I lived it. I survived, but so many of my brothers and sisters did not. And I survived for a reason. And part of that is to give voice to my soul family who is no longer here. I would give anything to have my brothers and sisters back, but I can't have them back. All I have is my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And when I sat with myself as a avid learner and a consumer of information generally, I knew that Aspen herself, myself, cannot fix the healthcare system. It's just not a problem set that I'm equipped to handle.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a part of the team who wants to help that, but as I see it in my 3D world, I don't see how I can that my resources would change
Yeah.
that story. But what I can say is what worked for me and give people access and resources to other modalities of healing. And when we say alternative health measures, we're also talking about massage therapy,
Mm-hmm.
chiropractics, acupuncture, things that people have been doing for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's not woo woo. Some of
Right.
it is. Reiki's a little woo woo. Reiki's a little woo woo. We can
Yeah.
honor that. That's
We
true.
can.
It's woo woo that I wholeheartedly believe in, but
Yeah.
it's a little woo woo. Acupuncture's not. Acupuncture's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Chiropractics is not. It's been around for thousands of years. It's just not covered by insurance.
Right.
And even if it was, how long would it take to get to that treatment?
Right. I know.
A lot. And especially in the case of trauma, again, we're not here to fix it. We're just here to transmute it. And so my nonprofit is to get veterans and active duty to healing services now. And so
Okay.
the nonprofit is called Healing Can't Wait. I think that most of your listeners are in San Diego, so I will announce that our nonprofit launch and fundraiser is on November 12th, 7 to 10 p.m. at the Maya Moon Collective. We are doing a Diwali party. So it's going to be Bollywood themed. We have a live henna artist. We have the selfie station. Naturally Desi is providing our food, mocktails. It's going to be so fun. It's so
Awesome.
beautiful. My husband's getting a live DJ from Delhi.
That's so
It's going to
cool.
be so fun, and it's for a great cause. And so once we get some capital underneath us, and once we get some infrastructure, that's when we can really put these services into play.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when um, our organization, Healing Can't Wait, has two responsibilities. Number one is to triage and to get that person, the active duty or veteran, to the services they need in the order that they need, or at least
Mm-hmm.
with some sort of plan. And
Yeah.
then two, to make sure that the healers are not footing the bill. Sliding scale, and out of the goodness of people's hearts, is a beautiful testament to humanity. It is not sustainable, especially in San Diego. People,
Right.
the math is not mathing.
Yeah.
And so we're going to foot the bill. Healing Can't Wait will foot the bill, and we're going to do that through multiple streams. I'm a certified grant writer, so
Dang. That's awesome.
where the funds come from, there'll be multiple streams, and of course, in-kind donations make all the difference. And the party itself is $22. For those who don't know, $22 for this party is the best $22 I've ever spent. But also, it's
Yes.
$22 because for those who don't know, 22 veterans a day take their own life. And it's a statistic that is completely heart-wrenching. And when I was growing up in the Navy, I would see like my chiefs and other leadership doing like 22 push-ups to raise
Mhm.
awareness. And I saw that all over Facebook, and I was like, okay, yeah, 22 push-ups, that's important. Da, da, da. And now that I'm like at a different point in my life, feel like I'm screaming from the rooftops that I do not want 22 push-ups. I want healthcare. And if I can't have healthcare, then we better have access to healing services, and they exist. And so all we need to do is to bridge the gap. And
Yeah.
that's what Healing Can't Wait is going to do.
That is freaking awesome. And you're going to be my 22nd episode. Is that,
Yes,
yeah, that is
yes.
cool.
That's why I reached out, because you were sharing on your 20th episode, and I just have so much respect for you and what you do, and I love how raw and authentic you are, and I've listened to every episode. I'm a big
oh my
fan.
gosh, thank you so much. That means
Yeah,
so
my
much to
pleasure.
me. What's been your
I,
favorite one so far? I'm just curious. Or like your top one that you
oh,
can think of.
I actually, so I can't name one because I listen to podcasts all the
Yeah, I'm
time.
sure it's hard.
Um, but I will say the theme that I love the most is the alcohol-free movement.
Awesome.
I
Cool.
love listening to that stuff because, I mean, like you, so I'm also sober. I've been sober for almost a year. I
Yay.
don't like you. I don't know my exact. Oh, I guess you do now because you
I
looked it up,
figured
I'm
it out.
sure.
Yes.
You figured it out, yeah. But like you, I also don't like have a date. And like you, I didn't want to go to AA. I don't feel like an alcoholic, but it certainly caused a lot of problems in my life. And it definitely was a poison that
Yeah.
derailed me multiple times. So, what do you call yourself? And do
Right.
you call yourself anything? And and
Right.
and you really provided a lot of nuance and a lot of empowerment around the alcohol-free movement. And I don't talk about my alcohol-free. I used to call it sober curious, but I don't think I'm
Mhm.
curious. I think I'm just sober now. Um,
Yeah.
it comes up sometimes because people are often being trying to be like, no, I'm okay. Do you have a mocktail? And mocktails are common now.
Yep.
But when I listen to your episodes, it there have been multiple times I've been like, same, same.
That's
I think
awesome.
that the one that's coming to mind is you were talking about, I don't know who the guest was, but you were talking about how you used to like pregame for parties so that people wouldn't
Mhm.
keep count of your drinks like at the party. And boy, did I do that. Boy, did I do that.
That's
Um,
funny.
and so just little things like that where I just felt
Mhm.
like seen and heard, even though I'm just listening. So I guess I don't have a specific
That's
episode, but my
great.
favorite theme is the alcohol-free stuff.
That's perfect because that's one thing sometimes I question, like I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want people to think I'm judging them or that's why I always say like it's your journey. Drink all you want. This is just what it's been like for me, you know?
Yeah.
And when you experience being alcohol free, you want to like share with everyone how fucking
Yeah,
good it
exactly. It's
is.
so good. Exactly. And that's exactly where my headspace was. Cause like I hear you on the judgment, and like I remember in my drinking career, because let's be
Mhm.
honest, I was an enlisted sailor. There was a whole career associated with
I'm
alcohol.
sure.
Yeah, very much a part of our culture. And I remember being like judged for drinking, and I of course I didn't appreciate it at the time, and I wouldn't have listened to anybody then
Right.
about going sober. But I also wish the narrative I had in my head about being sober was it was almost always religious,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was like a no fun zone,
Right.
like no fun for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want that. I wanted to have fun, especially in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And what you highlight and what like the new sober movement is highlighting is that being sober is awesome.
Yeah.
It's so great. Everything is so much better. It's
Yeah.
not like you are not missing out. There is nothing to miss. It's awesome. Like
It's
best kept
the
secret ever. Like, and so we want to
exactly.
share it. Like, this is amazing. You should do this. Not
Yeah,
in a judgment way, but like I want this for you. Like you need this in your
exactly.
life.
You are spot
Yeah.
on. That's exactly how I feel. That's why I share about it. So it like I don't even know the word for it, but just knowing that you were listening and you were like relating and it just blows my mind that this is happening. Like I'm so happy.
You're doing it. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
doing it. And I love that. Yeah. So I listened to the 20th episode. And again, this 22 number is the price of my tickets. It's a statistic that like takes up like a lot of space in my mind. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that's when I reached out to you again and I was like, I would like to do your 22nd episode, please. And so I'm really glad that you made it happen. I really, really deeply appreciate it.
Yes, this episode will come out next week, next Wednesday.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to your event, by the way. I don't know if I've RSVP'd
Yay.
yet, but I can't miss that. The last thing I wanted to touch on, we have a couple minutes, is I had Melanie on the podcast. She
Yeah.
was like one of my first people. She's like, sign me up, I'll do it, when I was like trying to get comfortable.
Yeah.
I work with her like I think you work with her like more often than just once, right? You've seen her? Or has it just been once?
Kind of. So she channeled for me in like a one-on-one session, and that's where we like met the first time. And then
Okay.
she did my Reiki master and like business training,
Oh,
which
oh,
was
that's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah, she's just a gem of a person, and she's like so successful, and like it's really validating to know that like people can do this.
Yes.
And I do these magic malas, and so she's of course a client. I say of course, I'm blessed to have her as a client.
Mhm.
And she of course she shared with her people on social media, which definitely helps. I got my first client that I didn't know personally or I didn't like meet
Yeah,
at an event. Um like in the ether through I pulled with her. I was like, how'd you find out about me? And it was through Melanie and her
that's awesome.
story. So yeah, really
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm glad that she told you to connect with me too. I'm so glad that you shared.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she's very good at connecting people who she thinks will align. So I'm excited. Yeah, she is she going to come to your event?
She's out of town,
Oh,
but
okay.
she donated to our silent auction. She donated um
Awesome.
to yeah, a channeling service, and then her sister from say Sacred Skin San Diego. Um she does these like spiritual facials, which sounds like what
Oh.
does that mean? But it like what does that mean? Find out. It's the best thing ever.
Have you had one
um
yet?
yeah, yeah,
Me
yeah.
too. Oh my
And
gosh, it was the best ever. Like
yeah,
Sacred
they're
Skin.
both just yeah, and they're just good people. Like they're good people to be around and
They
to
truly
have
are.
just in your space. And so they both donated to the silent auction, and I think they're both out of town um for not Mel. I
Some
always forget.
her sister?
Yeah.
I'm forgetting right now too.
Oh, I feel so bad. I have her face like right here and I feel
Me
so
too. I
bad.
know.
Um,
It's okay.
I hate when that happens. But it's around her birthday, so I think they're both out of town for her birthday.
Okay, tell me about what you're wearing around your neck. She has some beads for anyone who's listening. Tell us about
Yeah, I would love to. Um, so this is a mala, and a mala is Sanskrit for garland in the same way that rosary is Latin for garland. So that's usually a connecting point when I share that.
that. Mm-hmm.
And the anatomy of a mala is in itself sacred, and we talk about that on a call. And a mala is used to count, prayers, mantras, affirmations, whatever word feels right to you, that's the appropriate word to use. And it's a way to keep you grounded. It's a way to keep you like in this 3D reality for the PTSD piece. PTSD keeps you in a time that was before,
Mm-hmm.
not the present, and for sure not the future. It just like that's not how the trauma brain processes
Right.
information and memories. And so this was the mala itself was a tool to keep me on the 3D plane, and to like when I was in like places that could cause a flashback or a trigger, I
Mm-hmm.
would have something physically to hold on to. And then I have some academic background in human design and
Mm-hmm.
in like numerology, just being a math person, and of course some lived life experience. So I decided to do magic malas, and they're magic because they're 100% unique and designed for the person. And the part that makes it like, the most magic is that we actually get on a call and I ask you about your current human experience so that you in your own words can tell me what you want to move through, maybe
Mm-hmm.
past, and also what you want to call more in of or manifest. And because of my own live life experience, like you cannot surprise me. You
Yeah.
cannot, it's never going to be too much for me.
Yeah.
It's not the point.
That's
And
awesome.
that's how I select the crystals for that person's experience specifically. So there's a couple of layers and I'll run through them quickly. The pattern is based on your human design profile.
Wow.
The number of types of stones is based on your numerology and specifically your life path number. And then the crystals themselves are based on that current human experience. And we do all of that on a call. And then I make your physical tool. And again, this is not to fix it, this is to
Mm-hmm.
transmute it. And so I've seen, like, I started not too long ago, but I've had some months of data points now and they work.
It's so
And
cool.
work is different for everyone because their goals are different,
Mm-hmm.
but it is truly magic and I really love it.
Yeah, especially having something tangible. Like
Exactly.
I need to get one because I feel like we could make a perfect one for me and it could help me.
That's exactly, yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. Like it could help me in the darker moments that I have or even like frustration or when I'm trying to ground myself, just holding on to that.
Exactly.
That would be really healing for me in that moment. So, what a
100%.
freaking awesome idea. Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, and the human design profile and the numerology gives you access to your sacred contract
Mhm.
and the sense of knowing that there is life beyond this 3D plane. And then the 3D plane is captured in the crystals that are selected for you and your human experience and what you are dealing with, to give
Yeah,
it some movement, to give it some flexibility, not to fix it.
right. I love that. You are a special person, and I'm just so happy that we met and connected, and I
Me
can't
too.
wait to follow your journey and stay connected, throughout the future.
Definitely. Me too.
Your mission is freaking awesome. Like I want to cuss right now. Like it's so like I love the work that you're doing. I freaking love it, and I'm super proud of you. And I will see you at your event.
Yay! Thank you so much. Yeah, you can Venmo Aspen Aurora directly to avoid the Eventbrite fees. If you feel
Okay.
more secure in Eventbrite, it's there too. It's Aspen, Aspen, Aurora, Arora. So the Punjabi Aurora, not the Princess Aurora.
Okay.
And and that's also my Instagram handle. I do a ton of free content on Instagram,
Good.
and that's the
Awesome.
best place to find me. So yeah,
Well, yes, everyone go check out Aspen on Instagram. And if you are up for supporting this amazing cause that she has started and is beginning, let's go to the event together. All right,
thank you.
everyone. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you on the next episode.